As the federal government addresses the challenge of revenue, the need for effective tax compliance strategy has become very crucial. Now, the quest to enhance tax compliance has taken on a new urgency, with policymakers exploring innovative approaches to incentivize taxpayers and foster a culture of voluntary compliance. Now, part of this development is the introduction of a comprehensive review of its tax system, with a focus on developing more holistic and incentive-driven approach to tax compliance. Well, let's get talking. I introduced him earlier. He's a lead consultant and CEO, 2612 Consulting Professional Services, a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. Yes, let me add that. Very important, Mr. Peter Adebayo. It's been a while. Thank you so much. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you once again, Tolu, for having me. It's always very pleasant to be in your studio. I also want to appreciate the global audience for hooking up, as usual, to be part of this all interesting segment.
Thank you so much. Let's start with the issue of tax compliance in its entirety. I know that in a layman's understanding or layman's way of explaining it, when there's tax compliance, there will be more revenue, because that means people are doing things the way they should be done. But what's our problem with tax compliance in this part of the world? Where are we with regards to willingly people wanting to pay taxes?
Yeah, thank you very much for starting on that note. That's a very interesting question. Each time I find myself speaking on tax, across different platforms, it's a fundamental question I do ask my audience. And the question is, how happy are you paying taxes? It has received quite a number of mixed feelings in terms of reactions. And the starting point is actually educating the tax community, all right, the business community, on what tax compliance is, what it actually entails. And it's very simple. When you look at compliance, tax compliance is nothing but adherence to tax laws, adherence to regulations, adherence to policies. And we do that by declaring our income. And when I say income in aggregate and across different platforms. In other words, income earned from all sources. You declare the income honestly, and of course, within a stipulated period of time, you make returns to Federal Inland Revenue Service through the appropriate channels. And of course, the legal backing behind that is from the Constitution of Nigeria, specifically Section 24, subsection F, stipulates that every income earner is expected to honestly declare your income from all sources and remit.
All sources?
Yes, all sources. Accurately. In other words, correctly. So the tax world, the business community, they need to understand the concept of tax compliance. What you don't understand, you can't key into it. Yeah. So understanding of that presupposes that, they will have an idea of what they need to do to ensure that they are not in the wrong side of the law. That's one. Okay. Number two, if you look at our tax system today, you will agree with me that tax drive has become a very formidable aspect of our budgetary system. If you look at Nigerian budget of 2024 that we are implementing right now, okay, that budget is a budget of 27.5 trillion as approved by National Assembly. I get that's right. Now, of that 27.5 trillion,
yes,
FIRS has a target of 19.4 trillion tax revenue for this year alone, this fiscal year. And if we express that 19.4 million as a percentage of 27.5, that will probably be about 70.5%, which means predominantly the success of the budget for 2024 lies on our ability to realize our target when it comes to tax drive. Yes. And this is changing the narrative. Prior to now, years back, you will agree with me that Nigerian budgetary system has been predominantly financed by oil revenue. You can see now the reverse is the case.
Yes, yes.
Now, with 70% of our budget coming from tax, and about 29% thereabout coming from other sources.
Yeah.
That should tell you that, look, we need more advocacy. We need more enlightenment, because every citizen of Nigeria who earns income is a stakeholder in ensuring, before we start complaining about government, in ensuring that government succeeds in implementing the budget. Because you have a role, I have a role. Now, sometimes last month, the chairman of FRS, Dr. Zach Adedeji, released some figures. I think as at the end of Q1, he said 3.84 trillion had been generated as tax revenue for Q1. What does that tell you? Out of 19.4 trillion,
yes,
that is meant to be generated for
the year.
As at the end of Q1, we had generated 3.85 trillion.
Yeah.
If you express 3.85 trillion as a percentage of 19.4 trillion,
yes,
that would account for less than 25%. Which means, if you look at Q1, even though Dr. Adedeji said in his words that the 3.84 trillion was a 56.7% increase over what we generated as tax revenue in the previous year. That was 2023 Q1. What that tells us is, if you express that 56%, we are talking about maybe about 2.71 trillion. Now, if we generated that in the Q1, if you take away 3.85 from what we ought to have generated, because if you divide 19.4 by 4, that will give us maybe about 4.85, which means we ought to have generated 4.85 trillion by the end of Q1. But we ended up generating 3.84. So if you take away 3.84 from 4.85, that will leave us with about 910 billion, which is almost a trillion away from our target in Q1. What that tells you is that if we must achieve the 19.4 trillion over the remaining three quarters in the year, we will have no choice but to earn or generate 15.46 trillion for the 3 quarters left. If you divide 15.46 trillion by 3, that will give us about 5.15 trillion, which means for us to reach that target of 19.4 trillion in 2024, to be able to get the 70.5% of our budget targeted as approved by the National Assembly, beginning from Q2, which is ending, this weekend, we should be able to generate at least 5.15 trillion evenly for the next 3 quarters. So that's to tell us, to tell every Nigerian that the time has come for us to do what we can to be socially responsible, to be able to live up to expectation of our obligations as provided for in the Constitution of Nigeria, as stipulated in Section 24.
This topic is really interesting, and time is running so fast. Now, tax incentives now comes in, which is supposed to help attract investment or also, of course, attract businesses so that they can come in. But some say some private guys could take advantage of it. What do you make of that?
Well, you see, before we go to tax incentives, it is very fundamental for us to look at the determinants of tax compliance. You will agree with me that the tax system is a fundamental aspect of this compliance. And when you look at our tax system, it has 3 components. You have the tax laws, you have the tax policies, you have the tax administration. A combination of all of this put together will enhance efficiency and effectiveness in compliance. That is to be given. Now, when you also look at quite a number of other things, you want to ask so many questions. All right? Now, government is talking about ease of doing business. All right? And there is no doubting the fact that Nigeria is facing challenges, undoubtedly. Of course, I will not join the team of those who are looking at the challenges. I want to join the team of those who are going to look at way out of these challenges. Now, quite a number of windows are available. All right? That is something that some tax stations are doing presently. And one of those things happened before I came in here today. Some tax stations will ordinarily call taxpayers prior to when tax returns are due. I mean, I was called from a tax station this morning. Mr. Adebayo, All your clients that are in this taxation, please, Friday is the deadline, make sure they file. That's a fundamental thing, which is very good. All right? And one other thing that will enhance this tax compliance, even before we talk about these incentives, is the need to look at the system that we operate in, the tax system, and review it constantly. And that way we'll be able to identify areas of inadequacies, areas of inefficiencies, areas of lapses that will require attention, more importantly, reform. Thank God the president has put a very fantastic committee in place.
I was going to ask you that how far with that committee?
Yes,
let me allow you.
Headed by our very erudite and fantastic professional. Taiwo is doing a good job. But they have a major task ahead.
It's a lot of work.
Yes, a lot of work. Now, is part of the reform will cut across quite a number of issues surrounding this compliance. Now, number one, that's why every time Taiwo is going to speak, Taiwo will hardly speak without talking about the issue of multiplicity of taxes. It's a fundamental issue that must record the attention of the committee members. Now, it is not in the number of taxes that we collect that determine how much we can realize. And I want to join the team of those who are advocating for a pruning down of the number of taxes that we have in Nigeria. We can prune down the number of taxes to a maximum of 5 and generate 1,000% of what we're not going to generate if you have 1,001 sources of taxes. So I have no doubt. They are doing well. And I think, it's a major task. But then, by the time they finish, it will be expected that they're going to come out with recommendations.
Yes.
Some of those recommendations will have to go through the National Assembly. Of course, you know that. Yeah. And I want to also appeal to our lawmakers to support the efforts of this committee by ensuring that when the recommendations are passed to National Assembly by way of bills, they should accelerate the passage in the interest of, this reform. Now, one of the other windows, there is need for FIRS to demonstrate sensitivity towards the difficulties that taxpayers are experiencing.
True.
It's the reality. Because companies are grappling for survival. In the middle of this is not the best time to apply all the rules all over the world. It's like you are going to use the carrot and stick approach. Sometimes you need to look for a way to persuade them and bring them into the task so that they can be encouraged. A company that is almost dying, for you to go and preach this thing, it's going to be very difficult. So government can, open windows. I mean, of course, we have been doing it. Yeah. And by this weekend, the filing period will be coming to an end. For the organizations that have a 31st December as their filing, their year end, it is expected that they would have filed by 38th of June. And part of the window that will also suggest that the FRS should consider, they have been doing it, but because of the sensitivity that I'm trying to underscore, this time around, we have to look at issues on the basis of the reality of the economy. Yeah. The reality of this economy now, as much as people are willing to file between now and 38th of June, I want the government to open a window that would, maybe give some other extension, probably 2 weeks or 4 weeks, so that it will be interest-free. If you are not able to file for certain reasons, some of them want to file, but the attached cash element that will help them to be able to discharge these obligations, they are not available. So that's one way. Now, another way to create incentive is, by addressing objectively this issue of multiplicity of taxes. Another incentive that we can also that taxpayers can enjoy is the issue of addressing the complexities in our tax laws. Complexity with particular emphasis on interpretation of our tax laws. If you see our tax laws today, there are issues that lead to litigation here and there. You go to a jurisdiction A. You see, tax laws are interpreted to suit everybody's convenience. So that's why you see that a tax law may be interpreted in jurisdiction A for a particular reason. If you go to another jurisdiction, you'll be surprised that the interpretation that is going to be given to that, sometimes, depending on who is your advocate, it can be interpreted to suit the purpose of FRS. It can be interpreted to suit the purpose of the taxpayers. But in all of this, there must be a consensus in such a manner that, look, the taxpayers will not have a feeling that in the middle of difficulties and economic uncertainties, excruciating circumstances that they are facing, the government is just trying to kill their businesses.
Let's wrap up on the incentive part of it. Some businesses not wanting to take advantage of incentives. As I sometimes, many will say, government needs to watch it when you continue to give incentives.
Yes, I will agree with you, Tolu, that government needs to watch it so that it doesn't become so that it's not taken for granted.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't make a mess of our laws. The moment you give an impression that's why I said it's not going to be an automatic thing.
Okay.
It is going to be a consideration in consonance with the realities. The realities on ground now call for such a window.
Okay.
Of course, you may not open that window for 5 years if the economy is picking up and there are no issues. But when there is economic difficulty like we are facing in Nigeria today, it calls for a window. It was done in December. And if another one is coming now by the mid-year, I'm not sure it's going to be a bad thing. You know, one thing that is likely to do is going to have positive impact, you know, on taxpayers' compliance status. And of course, quite a number of other things, you know, that we need to that government need to look into. You know, the issue of what are they doing with these taxes? You know, accountability, transparency.
Yeah,
you know,
it's very
taxpayers
important.
must also be able to feel the positive impact of the fact that they are paid taxes.
Yes,
that is
will
an incentive. That will encourage naturally.
You have good roads.
Yes.
You have all of that.
That is it. So, but people are going to tell you, I am paying taxes, I'm still buying poles, I'm paying taxes, I'm still buying solar, and I'm still buying generator, and all of those things. So, government must work hard enough. Government is doing, you know, enough, even though I know it's very difficult to rebuild.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
And easier to destroy. Yeah. When you are coming from the point of trying to salvage an already battered economy, it's not going to be a tea and butter kind of a thing. So these are some of the issues, you know, before the government, you know, through the FRS. And of course, one other thing I need to mention to Lou is there is need for more synergy between and amongst some other units of FRS. The monitoring unit and the tax audit unit, they must work in consensus. They must work in tandem. They must not work at cross purposes. They must work, you know, they must not adopt what I call the suboptimal approach to achieving objectives. They're working for a common goal, which is to drive revenue, right? But a situation whereby you have 1, 2, 3 tax monitoring units of FRS writing a taxpayer for the same period for monitoring, it's uncalled for, all right? So there is need for that harmony, you know, of objectives, so that there could be what we call tax goals congruence, all right? And of course, I will not leave without mentioning this. When it comes to audit, there is something that, you know, the taxpayers normally frown at. Withholding tax system is a system that encourages deductions to be effected from income of taxpayers as an advance payment for future liabilities. But you see, when tax auditors go, of course, I can understand it because they are under pressure of target. So they want to look for a way of, they call it absorption of wiping off. All the totality of withholding tax credit notes that you have that are relevant to a particular tax audit period, they want to look for a way of wiping it off. And that's not in the interest of taxpayers. It is a disincentive, all right? So that the whole essence and the impact of allowing the taxpayers to enjoy the benefit associated with paying in advance will not be eroded.
Mr. Peter Adebayo, it's always interesting also having you here. He's a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. He's also the lead consultant, chief executive officer, 2612 Consulting and Professional Services. Thank you so much for your time on the program. We hope to see you soon again.
Tolu, before I go, let me just mention this.
Yes.
And I want to use it to address the tax community.
Okay.
You see, we have mutual roles to play.
Yes.
Everybody must come to terms with the fact that payment of taxes is a civic responsibility. And the moment we come to terms with this, irrespective of whatever it is, we will be able to support government by playing our own role. So it pays to pay your tax. Thank you once again, Tony, for having me.
Thank you so much. Well, it's really interesting, and I must tell you to enjoy your week. Have a very fruitful one. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Tony.
All right, then.